At 0230 hours on July 27, 1942, Major David Stirling watched runway lights flicker on across Sidi Haneish airfield. 18 jeeps, 58 men, 72 Vickers K machine guns capable of firing 950 rounds per minute. Between them and 37 parked Luftwaffe aircraft, nothing but 400 yards of open sand and a handful of German guards who had just turned on the landing lights for an incoming bomber. The mathematics were impossible. Airfields don't fall to light vehicles, yet in 15 minutes this raid would destroy more German aircraft than entire RAF bombing squadrons had achieved in weeks, and rewrite the doctrine of special operations warfare forever. The smell hit first: aviation fuel, hot metal baking under a full moon, the acrid bite of Egyptian dust. Navigator Mike Sadler had guided the convoy 50 miles through trackless desert without headlights, using only stars and a compass. No roads, no landmarks, just mathematical precision across a sea of sand that had swallowed armies. The jeeps idled in formation, 9 in each column, engines ticking, Vickers guns loaded with tracer ammunition that would ignite fuel tanks on contact. Each jeep carried 4 guns, 2 forward-facing, 2 on swivel mounts. Total firepower, 60-80-400 rounds per minute if every gun fired simultaneously. The Germans, confident in 235 miles of desert between them and British lines, had stationed exactly 0 heavy weapons on the perimeter. What Stirling didn't know, General Feldmarshal Erwin Rommel's supply crisis had reached critical mass. 70% of Axis supplies crossing the Mediterranean were being sunk by Royal Navy submarines. The Junkers Ju-52 transports parked on Sidi Hanesh weren't just aircraft, they were the jugular vein of the entire North African campaign. Each Ju-52 could haul 2.5 tons of ammunition, medical supplies, and spare tank parts that couldn't come by sea. Rommel had 96 operational tanks facing 300 British tanks at El Alamein, 40 miles east. The mathematics of attrition favoured the British, unless Germany could supply faster than Britain could destroy. Those transports represented weeks of production from Junkers factories in Dessau. 12 construction weeks per aircraft, 20 skilled workers per plane. Replacement cost, approximately 250,000 Reichsmarks each, about 9 million Reichsmarks worth of aviation assets sitting exposed under moonlight. But Stirling couldn't calculate any of that from 400 yards away. He could only see the runway lights illuminate, watch a German Heinkel bomber descend toward the strip, and make a decision in the span of 3 heartbeats. You're watching history no one teaches, not in schools, not in documentaries, not on streaming services. This channel exists because you subscribe. If this is the kind of history you want more of, clinical, precise, no propaganda, hit subscribe now. The SAS L detachment, Special Air Service Brigade, had existed for exactly 11 months. Formed in July 1941 from the remnants of failed commando experiments, Stirling's unit had lost 31 men on its first parachute operation. Stirling himself had fractured both legs when his chute failed to open during training. While recovering in a Cairo hospital bed, he'd written a doctrine on scrap paper. Small groups, deep penetration, high-value targets, bypass the front entirely, strike airfields, supply dumps, headquarters, assets the enemy considered untouchable because of distance. The British High Command considered him a nuisance until his raiders started destroying parked aircraft with demolition charges and timing fuses invented by Lieutenant Jock Lewis. Between November 1941 and July 1942, SAS teams had destroyed 90 Axis aircraft on foot, infiltrating air bases at night, placing Lewis bombs, 1 pound of plastic explosive, thermite, and motor oil on engine cowlings and fuel tanks. But foot infiltration took hours. Exposure time stretched across entire nights. One mistake, one alert guard, and the team faced encirclement with no escape route. Stirling needed speed. In June 1942, he acquired 12 American-made Willys Jeeps, modified them with armoured glass windscreens, and mounting brackets for Vickers K machine guns, weapons originally designed for RAF bombers, with a cyclic rate of 1/200 rounds per minute in some variants. The Vickers K, fed by 100-round Pan magazines, fired 303 British ammunition, the same round as infantry rifles, but in fully automatic sustained bursts. Tracer rounds, 1 in every 5, burned magnesium on contact with fuel or fabric, turning bullets into ignition sources. The tactical mathematics were brutal: 4 guns per jeep, 18 jeeps equals 72 guns. At 950 rounds per minute conservative estimate, that's 60 to 400 rounds per minute across the formation. A Ju-52's fuel tank held 2,200 litres of aviation gasoline. Puncture rate didn't matter. Tracer rounds would ignite vapour before the tank even ruptured fully. Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighters used self-sealing tanks, but only on the main cells. Auxiliary tanks and fuel lines remained vulnerable. Junkers Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers parked with full ordnance loads would chain react if ammunition stores detonated. Stirling fired a green flare. 18 jeeps lurched forward in a V formation, 9 on the left flank, 9 on the right, Stirling at the apex. The lead vehicles crossed the airfield perimeter at 40 miles per hour, engines screaming, Vickers guns opening fire before German ground crews understood what they were seeing. The sound was apocalyptic. 72 machine guns firing simultaneously produce 140 decibels, louder than a jet engine at 100 feet. Tracer rounds arced across the tarmac in streams of light, thousands per minute, converging on parked aircraft. The Ju-52s went first. Fabric-covered control surfaces ignited instantly. Aluminum fuselages, thin as soda cans in some sections, shredded under Boy 303 impacts. The first transport exploded 8 seconds into the raid when tracers found its fuel tank. The shockwave shattered windows in the control tower 300 yards away. German and Italian gunners scrambled to anti-aircraft positions, but the doctrine was wrong. Flak guns pointed skyward, designed for bombers at 10,000 feet, not jeeps at ground level moving 40 miles per hour in unpredictable patterns. MG-34 machine gun teams fired blind into the chaos, aiming at muzzle flashes and engine noise. One jeep took hits in the engine block and stalled. Lance Bombardier John Robson, 21 years old, from Yorkshire, kept firing his Vickers gun as the vehicle ground to a halt. A German machine gun burst caught him in the chest. He died manning his weapon, the only Allied casualty during the raid itself. What the Germans didn't know and couldn't have known was that the SAS had spent months perfecting a hit-and-run doctrine that treated speed as armour, treating firepower concentration as the primary objective, allowing British raiders to strike before the enemy could organise a defence. This is because the side that strikes first in a raid doesn't win the battle. They decide whether there will be one. Captain Alamein, commanding the second column, spotted a bomber with its engine cowling open. He stopped his jeep, dismounted, placed a Lewis bomb inside the exposed engine, and climbed back aboard as his driver accelerated. The bomb detonated 90 seconds later, sending the bomber's propeller spinning 50 yards across the sand. If you believe these men deserve to be remembered, not as propaganda but as they were, subscribe. These stories don't tell themselves. 15 minutes. That's how long the raid lasted, from first contact to final withdrawal. In those 15 minutes, 37 Luftwaffe aircraft were destroyed or damaged beyond field repair. The raiders expended an estimated 50,000 rounds of 303 ammunition, 680 kilograms of lead, and brass scattered across about 200 yards of airfield. The Germans and Italians fired back with everything available: small arms, machine guns. even an anti-aircraft gun crew that managed to depress their barrel low enough to fire horizontally. They hit 3 jeeps. One burst into flames immediately. The crew bailed and piled into a trailing vehicle. The second took engine damage but limped away. The third, Robson's jeep, was abandoned. Stirling ordered withdrawal at 02:45 hours. The jeeps scattered into the desert in groups of 3 to 5 vehicles, navigating by stars and Mike Sadler's compass bearings. German doctrine said pursuit at night was suicide. Vehicles driving without headlights through desert terrain risked collision, breakdown, or simply getting lost and running out of fuel 100 miles from anywhere. The SAS knew this. Stirling had calculated fuel consumption down to the gallon. Each jeep carried 20 gallons in the main tank plus 2 5-gallon jerry cans. Fuel consumption at cruising speed, 6 miles per gallon. Distance to the rendezvous at Bir el Qusair, 50 miles. They had margin for error, but not much. The French SAS detachment, 3 jeeps, commanded by aspirant André Zernheld, took a different route. Punctured tires and mechanical failures slowed them. When dawn broke at 05:30 hours, they were still exposed, 30 miles from safety. 4 Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers found them at 6:15. The Stukas made 9 attack runs, firing 20mm cannons and dropping 50-kilogram bombs. The French scattered their vehicles and returned fire with Vickers guns, hitting one Stuka and forcing it to break off. But Zernheld, 26 years old, took cannon fire to the chest and abdomen. He bled out in the sand 20 minutes later. The surviving French commandos piled into the one remaining operational jeep and reached Bir el Qusair at 11 hours, 7 hours late, delirious from heat and dehydration. 15 of the original 18 jeeps returned, 56 of 58 men, 2 killed, Robson during the raid, Zernheld during the withdrawal. The exchange rate, 37 German aircraft for 2 Allied soldiers and 3 vehicles. Now let me tell you what the mathematics of Sidi Haneish tells. The 37 aircraft destroyed at Sidi Haneish represented more than hardware. Each Ju-52 transport could fly 3 supply runs per day between Crete and North Africa, 700 tons of cargo capacity per week across the formation destroyed. Rommel's forces required 1,500 tons of supplies daily just to maintain defensive positions. Every transport destroyed added hours to replacement timelines. Junkers factories in Germany produced 50 Ju-52s per month across all assembly lines, meaning Sidi Haneish wiped out 75% of 1 month's production in 15 minutes. But the deeper impact was doctrinal. The Germans reacted by diverting infantry units from frontline positions to guard rear area installations. Every airfield within 200 miles of the front received reinforced security, machine gun nests, sandbag emplacements, roving patrols, searchlights. This defensive reallocation pulled approximately 2,000 combat troops away from Rommel's main force at precisely the moment General Bernard Montgomery was massing British armour for a counter-offensive at El Alamein. The Germans also grounded aircraft during full moons, eliminating night operations, which reduced their own supply flights by 40% during optimal flying conditions. The Allies noticed. Winston Churchill, whose son Randolph had accompanied an earlier SAS raid, received Stirling's after-action report within 72 hours. Churchill scribbled in the margin, "This is the sort of vigour we need." Stirling received promotion to lieutenant colonel and authorization to expand L detachment to full regimental strength, 560 men. The SAS budget increased tenfold. More jeeps, more weapons, more raids. What the Germans didn't know, Mike Sadler, the navigator, had made this possible. Desert navigation in 1942 relied on sun compasses during the day and star fixes at night. No GPS, no radio beacons. Sadler used a theodolite, a surveying instrument accurate to 1 degree of arc, combined with celestial navigation tables and dead reckoning. He calculated vehicle drift from wind, adjusted for magnetic variation, and compensated for odometer error caused by tire slippage in sand. Over 50 miles of trackless desert, his navigation error was less than 200 yards. The convoy arrived at Sidi Hanesh within 3 minutes of scheduled time. Without Sadler's precision, the raid would have missed the airfield entirely, and 18 jeeps would have been stranded in the desert at dawn, easy targets for Luftwaffe fighters. The raid's long-term mathematics altered the entire North African campaign. Between July and November 1942, SAS jeep raids destroyed an additional 150 Axis aircraft across 12 separate operations. Rommel's supply situation deteriorated from critical to catastrophic. By October 1942, German forces at El Alamein were rationed to 1/3 normal fuel allocations. Tanks sat immobile for lack of gasoline. Artillery batteries fired half the normal bombardment rates to conserve ammunition. When Montgomery launched Operation Lightfoot on October 23, Rommel's Panzer Army had 96 operational tanks, 500 artillery pieces, and enough fuel for 3 days of defensive combat. The British fielded 1,000 tanks, 2,000 guns, and full supply lines stretching back to Alexandria. The Second Battle of El Alamein ended with Axis forces in full retreat, abandoning Libya entirely. By November 1942, the SAS didn't win El Alamein, but they changed the mathematics. Every aircraft destroyed added hours to German supply timelines. Every diverted infantry battalion weakened Rommel's front. Every grounded transport during full moons reduced cargo tonnage, small actions, compounding interest, strategic leverage. 58 men in 18 jeeps destroyed assets worth 9 million Reichsmarks and forced the enemy to redeploy 2,000 soldiers to guard against future raids. The doctrine spread. By 1943, SAS-style units operated in Italy, France, and Greece. The US Army created its own version, the Office of Strategic Services Operational Groups. The Soviets deployed long-range reconnaissance battalions behind German lines in Ukraine. Jeep-mounted raids with automatic weapons became standard special operations procedure through the Cold War and into modern conflicts. David Stirling was captured by Germans in January 1943 during a raid in Tunisia. He spent the rest of the war in Italian and German POW camps, including Colditz Castle. Hitler's commando order, issued October 1942, mandated immediate execution of all captured special forces. Stirling survived only because Field Marshal Rommel, the one German commander who ignored the order, had already left North Africa. Rommel later stated in captured documents that the SAS caused more damage to the German war effort than any other British unit of equivalent size. Paddy Mayne took over SAS command after Stirling's capture. He led the regiment through the Italian campaign and D-Day operations, personally destroying 130 additional Axis aircraft before war's end. He received 4 Distinguished Service Orders, the only person in British history to earn that many. Mayne died in a car accident in Northern Ireland in 1955, age 40. Mike Sadler survived the war, remained in the SAS through the 1950s, and became the last living member of the original L detachment. He died January 4, 2024, at age 103. In interviews, he described the Sidi Hanesh raid as mathematically perfect. We arrived exactly when and where we needed to be and left before the enemy could respond. That's all special operations are, mathematics and audacity. The mathematics of Sidi Hanesh: 18 jeeps, 72 machine guns, 50,000 rounds fired, 37 aircraft destroyed, 15 minutes elapsed time, 50 miles navigation error, less than 200 yards, 2 men killed, 9 million Reichsmarks in enemy losses, 2,000 German troops redeployed, 40% reduction in Luftwaffe night operations, 75% of 1 month's Ju-52 production eliminated. The exchange rate, $4.5 million in enemy losses per Allied casualty, measured in 1942 dollars. If this stayed with you, press like. In one word, tell us what this was. Subscribe. Because when history stops being examined, it turns into myth. But the airfield at Sidi Haneish still exists. Modern satellite imagery shows the original runways now crumbling concrete overtaken by sand. The German control tower collapsed in the 1960s. No monument marks the site. Egyptian authorities list it as abandoned military installation circa 1942. But in July each year, a few dozen people, relatives of SAS veterans, military historians, Special Forces personnel from Britain, France, and the United States gather at the coordinates 310945 N 27 to 3738E. They pour 18 small glasses of whiskey into the sand, one for each jeep. They read two names, John Robson, Andre Zernheld, and they measure 200 yards from the old runway threshold to the spot where Mike Sadler's navigation brought the convoy to within 3 minutes of schedule, across 50 miles of trackless desert under a full moon 82 years ago. The raid lasted 15 minutes. The strategic consequences lasted until Germany surrendered North Africa. The doctrinal changes lasted until today. Every Special Forces unit in the world studies Sidi Hanesh: speed, surprise, firepower concentration, precision navigation, and withdrawal before the enemy adapts. The mathematics haven't changed. Force multiplication through training, innovation, and calculated audacity. 58 men against an airfield, impossible odds, until someone calculates the actual math: 72 guns versus thin-skinned aircraft, 15 minutes versus German reaction time, 200-yard navigation error versus 400-yard standoff distance. The numbers worked, barely. That's what makes it worth remembering.